The world is changing. Conflicts shape our future. This is New Informative. Welcome you to Russian and Ukraine War Series.
The Ukraine-Russia war began in February 2022, but its roots go back many years. To understand why the conflict started, it is important to look at the political, security, and historical developments that shaped relations between Ukraine, Russia, and the West after the Cold War. Ukraine became an independent country in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Its independence was internationally recognized, including by Russia. After gaining independence, Ukraine tried to balance its relationship between Russia and Europe. It maintained economic and cultural ties with Russia, while also exploring closer political and economic integration with the European Union. After the Cold War, NATO continued to exist and gradually expanded eastward. Several countries in Central and Eastern Europe joined the alliance. Russia repeatedly stated that NATO expansion toward its borders posed a security concern. NATO and its member states argued that expansion was based on the voluntary decisions of independent countries and that NATO was a defensive alliance. This disagreement over Europe's security structure remained unresolved for decades. Ukraine's geographic position made it especially important. The country borders Russia, lies between Russia and NATO members, and serves as a key transit route for energy pipelines supplying Europe. For Russia, maintaining influence over Ukraine was seen as strategically important. For many Ukrainians, closer ties with Europe were viewed as a path toward political reform, economic development, and independence from Russian influence. A major shift occurred in 2014. Large public protests broke out in Ukraine after the government suspended plans to sign an association agreement with the European Union. These protests led to a change of government. Russia described the events as an unconstitutional takeover supported by Western countries. Western governments described them as a popular uprising against corruption. Soon after, Russia annexed Crimea following a referendum that was not recognized by most of the international community. Armed conflict also began in eastern Ukraine, in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. From 2014 to 2021, fighting in eastern Ukraine continued at a lower level. According to the United Nations, more than 14,000 people were killed during this period. Several ceasefire agreements, known as the Minsk Agreements, were signed but never fully implemented. The conflict remained unresolved, with periodic violence and growing mistrust. Another major issue was NATO membership. Ukraine was not a NATO member, but in 2008, NATO stated that Ukraine could become a member in the future. In 2019, Ukraine officially declared NATO membership a strategic goal. Russia stated repeatedly that Ukraine joining NATO would be unacceptable and would pose a direct threat to its national security. Western governments maintained that Ukraine had the right to choose its own alliances. This disagreement became one of the central points of tension. In 2021, Russia began deploying large numbers of troops near Ukraine's borders. Satellite imagery and intelligence assessments confirmed the buildup. Russia demanded security guarantees from NATO, including a halt to further expansion and limits on military deployments in Eastern Europe. Diplomatic talks were held between Russia, the United States, and European countries, but no agreement was reached. At the same time, Russian leadership increasingly questioned Ukraine's status as a separate nation. Ukraine strongly rejected these claims and emphasized its sovereignty and internationally recognized borders. These opposing views deepened the conflict beyond military concerns and into questions of national identity and statehood. In February 2022, Russia recognized the separatist-controlled regions in eastern Ukraine as independent. Shortly afterward, Russian forces entered Ukraine from multiple directions, including from Russia, Belarus, and Crimea. Missile strikes targeted military facilities and infrastructure across the country. Russia stated that the operation was intended to address security threats, protect Russian-speaking populations, and prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. Ukraine and most United Nations member states rejected these justifications, stating that Ukraine posed no immediate threat to Russia and that the invasion violated international law. The invasion triggered a major humanitarian crisis. Millions of civilians were displaced, and Western countries imposed extensive economic sanctions on Russia. Ukraine received military, financial, and humanitarian assistance from the United States, the European Union, and other allies. In conclusion, the Ukraine-Russia war began due to long-standing security tensions after the Cold War, Ukraine's strategic importance, unresolved conflict since 2014, disagreements over NATO expansion, failed diplomacy, and competing views on sovereignty and national identity. The full-scale invasion in 2022 was the result of accumulated tensions rather than a single event.
Hope you found this video informative. For more videos, like, share, and subscribe to New Informative. Stay informed.